An NBA lockout is something that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to discuss it. Nobody wants to anticipate the possibility of what happened just a handful of years ago. We lost basically a third of a season, and the season that we did end up having was very weird and it was very clumped together. And especially coming off of a 2 to 3 year stretch where the seasons were already weird, the possibility of a lockout within the next couple of seasons in the NBA is terrifying. And so nobody's talking about it. But today we're going to. Really quickly though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticketing app that is all about ease of use and value. They want you to get the best tickets for your money, and they want it to be easy to find that kind of value. So for example, football season is coming up. I'm telling you, if you want to get good value for week 1 tickets, SeatGeek is the place to be. If you're looking at my team, Panthers playing against the Browns in week 1, you can scroll through here and see exactly where the best value is for 1 ticket, 2 tickets. It gives you all the info you need for the game. And then you can look on this map right here, and it's going to tell you exactly in the stadium where the best value is. Green is good, yellow is worse, and red is bad, and it's really that simple. You can click on each thing. It's going to show you exactly what the view would look like at each of these seats, and that way you know exactly where your seat is, exactly how much it's going to cost you, and you don't have to do hours and hours of research. In the past, I've used SeatGeek for all different kinds of events: concerts, football games, basketball games, hockey games, and when I'm excited to go to the event, I don't want to sit there and do a ton of research and figure out, oh, is this the best seat? Is this the best value? I just want it to be done for me, and that is exactly why SeatGeek exists. So if you have an event coming up, whether it be a concert, football, basketball, whatever the case may be, SeatGeek is the place to get your tickets. And I have an offer for you as well. When you use code SPORTING and you click the link in the description, you can get $20 off your first order with SeatGeek. Again, that is clicking the link in the description or using code SPORTING for $20 off at SeatGeek. And thank you again to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Okay, so for me, when we're talking about the future of the league and how that could possibly lead to a lockout, I do think that you need to start with some positives, because I don't want this to seem like the league is just doom and gloom and everything wrong that can happen is going to happen over the next couple of seasons. Because to me, in terms of talent, especially young talent, I would argue that the league has never been in a better place right now than it has been in any other point in league history. When you just look at how young guys are coming into the league, how good they are becoming at such young ages. They're becoming all-star, all-NBA caliber players at 23, 24, 25 years old, becoming top 10, top 15 players from all around the world, not just from the States. And every single year in a draft, it feels like there's another franchise guy coming to the league. And every single year in the draft, there's 10 really, really good players. I think we've gotten better at developing. We've gotten better at drafting. And the way that basketball is played now is more conducive to really helping guys along and really increasing their productivity level if they're really talented players. And that is a fantastic thing. I think it's a thing that a lot of other sports leagues struggle with, is properly developing players and properly capitalizing on the talent that comes into the league. And I would argue the NBA does about as good of a job as that of any other league in the world. And that's a huge thing for their future. And it's going to be really exciting to see, especially these younger players, kind of create this next era in the league where we've got all these teams that have a ton of draft picks and such great futures in the league. I think that's really important and critical to talk about. However, as we relate that now to a potential lockout situation, the theme of the last 10 to 15 years, in my opinion, in the league has been a lot of progressive thoughts, right? So there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of younger GMs come into the equation. There's been a lot of new ideas come into the equation. A lot more analytics, 3-point shooting, player empowerment, all these trades where you're getting all these future draft picks. And whenever there's that much change, and then you have to agree to a new CBA, which could potentially lead to a lockout, that's a big deal, right? And so we'll just go through them one by one. All of these draft picks that are floating out there, and these teams that are willing to give up 7, 8 draft picks in a single trade, in a single transaction, and the way that the value of superstar trades have changed so dramatically over the last 10 years, and we're still using rules going back to the Stepien rule that doesn't allow you to actually trade draft picks every other year. You have to do picks and swaps and all this different stuff. We're still using rules that haven't quite caught up with what it really looks like when a team trades away all this draft capital. And we could be looking at a situation 10 years from now where there's 5 teams in a league that cashed in on all these draft picks, and the other 25 teams in the league just can't keep up because of how much talent is on those teams that ended up with all those draft picks. Or we could be looking at a situation where there's 6 teams in a league that did give up all those assets, all those picks, and aren't even remotely competitive because they went 7 years without a draft pick. All of that should be really, really concerning. And I think the possibility of trying to figure out how you can restrict that for the safety of the team, similar to what the Stepien rule was initially meant to be, but also still allow for a lot of the interest that comes with allowing those kinds of trades. I think that's a really interesting line to try and balance between. And that's just one example, right, of all these new ideas, like player movement, all these guys wanting to shift to different teams, being unhappy in particular places. All of that chaos at times is good for the interest in the league, but also you want a little bit more stable of a product, especially if you're an owner of a team, because you want to make sure that year after year it's something that you can count on, especially when you're dealing with 3, 4, 6, 7, $8 billion valuations on these NBA franchises. And that's just a few things, but I think really when you look at how the league has evolved over the last couple of seasons, or the last couple of years, I should say, it's very easy to pinpoint a lot of different issues that it's going to be hard for owners and players to come to a new agreement on because of how much has changed, because of how many new ideas have come into the league, because of how many new faces there are in the league, both players and GMs and owners as well. And the issue that I feel like nobody's really talking about as relates to a lockout is the massive jump in salaries that we're going to be seeing over the next couple of seasons. So think about like pre the summer of 2016, a max contract was $25 million a year. Now we're looking at maxes where there are players right now currently signed to contracts that a handful of years from now are going to be paying them in some cases, almost $60 million a year. Well, in a couple of seasons, there's a new TV rights deal that's going to kick in for the NBA, exactly like it did in 2016. And that is going to massively increase the revenue that the NBA brings in, which increases the salary cap, which increases player salaries under our current rules. Unless the CBA changes and they agree to a new CBA that changes the percentage that players are going to get from max contracts. Right now, whatever that percentage is equates to a couple of years from now, $50, $60 million a year. Under a new salary cap with increased revenue, we could be looking at players signing contracts where in the first year of their contract, they're earning 60, in some cases, $70 million a year on a max contract. Now, I'm all about if the player is worth it and someone wants to pay him that, and that's what the CBA is, more power to them. Get as much money as you possibly can. But from an optics standpoint, when you have that much of an increase over a decade or a 15-year span, guys go from the max you can make is 20, 25 a year to 70 a year in the first year of your deal. That's going to be a big deal to deal with in terms of optics and in terms of what the owners are willing to pay and deal with. Even though they're making a ton of money off these teams, it's still something you're going to have a conversation about. And more importantly, in terms of the operations of the league, you have to anticipate this cap spike because we all know what happened in 2016. They didn't anticipate it. They weren't on top of it. It was one of the biggest mistakes of Adam Silver's, I think, so far pretty good commissioner tenure. They didn't anticipate what a massive cap spike meant for the league in 2016 that allowed Kevin Durant to join the Warriors. For a lot of people, that kind of like ruined the competitiveness of the league for the next couple of seasons. And then also allowed for guys like Ian Mahinmi and Evan Turner to be making $20 million a year. And under the new rules, like with the new revenue, that could mean that these role player guys, these Evan Turner, Ian Mahinmi type guys from 2016 could be making $30 or $35 million a year on role player contracts because of how much money will be out there when the revenue does increase and ultimately the cap increases. Now, I'm anticipating that they're going to be a little bit smarter about this time, and that they are going to anticipate the cap increasing because they know exactly what happened in 2016, and they're not going to allow that to happen again. We've also seen the league manipulate the salary cap over the last couple of seasons because of the suspension of the league and the fact that revenue was down significantly, and there was no real way for them to directly tie the revenue to the salary cap in that particular instance because the salary cap would be much, much lower than it is now. So we've already seen them manipulate it in certain ways, and I would imagine they're going to find a way to do the same thing when the salaries do increase and the revenues do increase over the next couple of seasons. But that just adds one more thing that they need to figure out. They need to hash out exactly what the percentage of max contracts is going to look like. They need to figure out exactly what it's going to look like when they need to smooth over the cap. And all I'm doing in this video is listing a variety of issues that the league is going to have to figure out, and they're going to have to figure it out in a timely manner in order to avoid a potential lockout, which is something that absolutely nobody wants. The owners are making so much money, the players are making so much money, the interest in the league is very high. Nobody wants to miss games or to shorten the season, especially coming off a couple of seasons where we literally just got back on a normal schedule. We're going to have a normal year, hopefully have a normal off season, knock on wood. We just went through 2.5, 3 years of a crazy schedule. So you'd imagine everybody's going to be motivated to prevent a lockout. But no matter how motivated you are, when you have to deal with what player movement is going to look like over the next, CBA. Are there going to be incentives for guys to not be traded within the first couple years of their contract? You're not going to be allowed to be traded within the first couple years of your contract. Is there going to be a team side no trade clause where they can activate a clause that says, no, we are not going to trade you for the first 2 to 3 years of this contract? Are there going to be financial penalties to players that request trades and are unhappy? What is the Ben Simmons situation? Him getting money back from Philadelphia after sitting out and not playing for them. What does that mean for the player movement stuff? What does the player salary stuff and the cap spike stuff that we've been talking about mean? What about all the young talent in the league and all these teams that have a ton of draft picks over the next couple of seasons? Is there going to be a way to regulate that so that these teams either don't become too good or the teams that traded the picks away don't become too bad? There's so many questions, not even, just limited to all the things that I just listed off. And what I'm hoping is that the league is anticipating these things and that we as fans are prepared for what's going to be probably a pretty tumultuous negotiation period over the next couple of seasons in which they are trying to figure out what the new CBA looks like. And the reason that I make this video is not to, concern everybody, not to make it seem like it's all doom and gloom, but to just highlight the fact that as historic as the last 10 to 15 years of the NBA have been in terms of introducing new ideas and how progressive they've been and how much different the league is now, how much basketball and the NBA itself have changed over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think how positive in a large part that has been. That also introduces a real possibility that a significant long lockout could be coming if the two sides can't come to an agreement. And whenever there's this much money on the table, whenever there's this much change involved, and whenever there's this many issues to figure out, I wouldn't be surprised at all if a couple of seasons from now we're looking at a year that is far, far from normal and looks much more like the lockout that we had, over a decade ago now. But hey, what do I know? I'm sure it'll be fine, right? I'm sure everything will be just fine.